When you die in America, Social Security sends your family a check for $255. That number was set back in the 1950s, and it hasn't moved since. Meanwhile, the average funeral with a viewing and a burial runs about $8,300. So the government's official death benefit covers roughly 3% of the bill. And here's the strange part. The most expensive years of your life are usually the last ones. The system that pays for them is generous in some places and completely silent in others. For most of American history, dying was a home affair. People died in their own beds, cared for by family, and a neighbor or a local undertaker handled the body. There was no end-of-life industry because death wasn't something you outsourced. Two big things changed that. First, we started living longer. 100 years ago, people often died fast. An infection, an accident, a heart attack. Today, most Americans die slowly, from chronic conditions like heart disease, cancer, or dementia over months or years. Slow deaths cost money. They need doctors, hospitals, medications, and hands-on care. Second, in 1965, the government created Medicare, the federal health insurance program for people 65 and older. Suddenly, there was a giant, reliable payer for the medical side of getting old, and hospitals reorganized around it. But Medicare was built to treat illness, not to manage dying. So in 1983, Congress added the Medicare Hospice benefit. That's coverage for comfort care when a doctor certifies you're likely to die within 6 months. The idea was decent. Stop chasing cures that won't work and pay for peace instead. Around all of this, a business grew. Hospice companies, funeral homes, cremation providers, and the people who settle estates. Each one exists to take a piece of the process off the family's hands, and each one has a price. Let's separate the two halves of dying, because they're paid for in completely different ways. There's the cost of care before death, and the cost of the funeral after. Start with the funeral, since it's the number most families recognize. The National Funeral Directors Association tracks this. The median funeral with a viewing and a burial, that's the middle price. Half cost more and half cost less is about $8,300. Cremation with a service runs around $6,300, and here's the catch most people miss. Neither of those includes the cemetery. The plot, the vault, the headstone, those are all separate, and they can add a few $1,000s more. Strip it down to a direct cremation, no viewing and no ceremony, and you can land under $2,000. So the range is wide, and a lot of it comes down to choices made in a single afternoon, usually by grieving people who've never priced any of this before. To make that median number real, compare it to income. The typical Social Security retirement check is around $2,000 a month. So a median funeral with burial is roughly 4 months of a retiree's entire Social Security income spent in a matter of days. For a lot of households, that's not sitting in a checking account. It comes out of savings, or off a credit card, or from the kids. Now the care before death, which is bigger and far less predictable. Roughly a quarter of all Medicare spending goes to people in the last year of their lives. That's not because anyone's being wasteful. It's because the sickest year is by definition the most expensive one. Hospital stays, intensive care, specialists, drugs, then there's hospice itself. On paper, hospice is one of the few genuinely affordable parts. If you qualify, Medicare covers almost all of it. You might pay $5 for a prescription. So the expensive part isn't the hospice care, it's everything the system decides isn't hospice care, and that's where the money starts to disappear. So who actually collects all this money? Follow it, and you'll find two very different businesses. The funeral side is old, local, and quietly consolidated. For generations, funeral homes were family-run, and many still look that way. Same name on the sign, same building in town, but behind a lot of those signs sits a corporation. The largest operator in the country owns hundreds of funeral homes and cemeteries under local brand names, so the family down the street may not realize they're buying from a national chain. That matters because a funeral is what economists call a distress purchase. You're buying fast, you're grieving, and you're not shopping around. That's a seller's dream. Prices don't have to compete very hard. The hospice side is newer, and investors have reshaped it. Hospice looked like a quiet corner of healthcare until people noticed something. Medicare pays hospices a flat daily rate per patient, whether that patient needs a lot of care that day or almost none. Enroll patients who are declining slowly, keep your costs low, and that daily rate turns into steady profit. Private equity firms noticed too. They bought up hospices, and a recent analysis found that private equity-owned hospices tend to earn the most while spending the least on actual patient care. Underneath both businesses is the same tension. The frontline workers, the hospice aides, and the funeral staff are often paid modestly. The margins collect higher up with the owners and the investors. And when a company gets bought, sold, and bought again, valuation, the pressure to hit financial targets rarely makes the care better. It usually just makes it leaner. Here's where families get blindsided. So let's walk through the order of who pays for what. Medicare pays first for the medical care, the hospital, the doctors, the hospice. But Medicare has a huge blind spot, and it's the one that ruins people. Medicare does not pay for long-term custodial care. That means if your dying takes the shape of months or years in a nursing home, needing help with eating, bathing, and dressing, Medicare largely won't cover the room and board. People assume it does. It doesn't. So who covers that? Often it's you out of pocket until the money runs low. Then Medicaid steps in. And here's the difference people constantly mix up. Medicare is the health insurance you earned by turning 65. Medicaid is the program for people with very little income and few assets. To get Medicaid to pay for a nursing home, you generally have to spend down almost everything you own first. The house, the savings. Much of it goes to the care before the government picks up the rest. There's also long-term care insurance, a private product built to cover exactly this. But most Americans don't own it. It's expensive, and many who bought it watch their premiums climb. And then there's the pay-or-nobody bills. Family. When a spouse or a daughter leaves work to care for someone at the end, that labor is free to the system and enormously costly to them. AARP has valued this unpaid caregiving in the hundreds of billions of dollars a year. It never shows up on an invoice, but it's paid in lost wages, lost savings, and lost time. The sticker prices are only the beginning. The real damage usually hides in the parts nobody quotes you up front. Take the funeral again. That base price you're handed rarely stays the base price, or salary. There's the casket, often marked up substantially. There's the vault the cemetery requires, flowers, the obituary, the death certificates, the catering. Line by line, an $8,000 funeral becomes 11 or 12, and each edition arrives at a moment when saying no feels almost disrespectful. That emotional pressure is built right into the pricing. On the care side, the hidden cost is time. A slow decline from dementia can stretch for years, and every year is another year of somebody paying. In cash, in Medicaid spend down, or in a family member's unpaid labor. The bill isn't one number, it's a meter that keeps running. Then there's what gets left behind. When someone dies still owing money to a nursing home, a hospital, a credit card, families often panic, assuming they've inherited the debt. Usually, they haven't. In most cases, debts are paid out of the person's estate. That's whatever they left behind. If there's nothing there, the debt often can't follow the children. But some states still have older laws that can reach adult kids for a parent's nursing home bill, and grieving families rarely know where they stand. So they pay things they may not owe just to make the phone calls stop. Step back and the logic of the whole thing comes into focus. Dying is expensive in America, not because someone's cackling in a boardroom, but because of how the incentives line up. Medicare will spend freely to treat you and to keep you comfortable because that's medical care, and that's what the program was built to buy. But it won't pay for the long, slow, non-medical work of custodial care. That got left to families and to Medicaid, and it never touched the funeral at all. So the two costs most likely to land on ordinary people are exactly the biggest payer skips. Meanwhile, the private businesses that fill those gaps operate in moments when customers can't really negotiate. You don't comparison shop from a hospital bed or a funeral home lobby. That's not a flaw in the strategy. That is the strategy. Now point this at the future. The baby boomers, the largest generation in American history, are moving into their final decades. More people will need this care for longer, with fewer children around to provide it for free. Demand is climbing while the unpaid family workforce shrinks. That combination doesn't push prices down. So what does the economics of dying in America actually deliver? For the medical stretch, the hospital and the hospice, the system is more generous than people expect. If your death is quick and medical, Medicare absorbs most of it. The trouble is everything outside that box. The long custodial years and the funeral at the end are where a lifetime of savings can quietly drain away. And they're the parts the family sees most clearly because they're the parts the family pays. Who wins? The investors who bought into a business with steady demand and customers who can't shop around. Who carries the risk? The person dying and the people who love them. That's the real shape of it. A system that spends lavishly to treat the end of life and leaves the family holding the bill for the end itself. In America, the medicine is insured. The dying is not. If this made the money behind it a little clearer, you can like the video and subscribe. We keep following the dollars through the business of growing old in America.